Thank you for joining us at Expecting Answers, a video blog that answers all your questions and guides you through the egg donation and surrogacy journeys. My name is Ronny Dgani, and today I will be interviewing one of my favorite third-party reproduction experts, Xiomara Hernandez. Xiomara is an international liaison at Idaho Center for Reproductive Medicine, a highly recommended clinic in Idaho. Today, Xiomara will answer all your burning questions about egg donation, how to choose your egg donor, how to choose her agency, her clinic, what is the process of egg donation journey, and she will also share some cost-saving tips. Before we start, I think that our audience would love to hear a little bit about you and your professional background.
Sure.
And of course about Ishai and the kids as well.
Well, so I think I started working in this industry in 2015. I used to work, or I started, my journey as well in this field, working for an international agency who coordinated processes start to end for intended parents, and we used to work with several countries and several markets. So I got to learn the in and outs of the industry, and I help a lot of international intended parents navigate their journey start to end in different countries and with different providers. So after about 4 years of working with this agency, I had the chance and the opportunity to work for my favorite clinic in the world. And so that's how I started working for the Idaho Center for Reproductive Medicine. And it's been almost 4 years now, and a real pleasure to work with them. So now, even though I'm working for a clinic specifically, I still get to help our internationally intended parents from the beginning until the end, because I do have that experience and we don't mind. So it's like a bonus that they get when they work with us.
Yeah. I know that, a lot of the people in this industry are in it for the money, and there are the people who's in it because their heart is in the right place. And from getting to know you and your husband Ishai, I know that you put everything you have into it. You put your heart into it, you put your effort into it. You're available like 24 hours a day for intended parents, and you're helping them as an objective, point of view to help them when they're stuck on their way. So first of all, thank you so much again for joining me, and I'm sure that all of our listeners will enjoy this conversation. So today we're going to focus, we can speak for hours, but today we're going to focus on the egg donation process. And there are a lot of intended parents who are starting this journey, and it's so complex, and they struggle in the beginning how to start, what are the steps in the journey, and what exactly do they need to ask when they're starting to look for their egg donor?
Sure. I mean, basically choosing an egg donor is probably the hardest, the most difficult decision, right? And it's also so personal that it's gonna depend on many factors. So depending on what the budget looks like, what the criteria and preferences that intended parents have in mind for their egg donor, this process can start in many different ways, because as you well know, clinics in the US, most of them, not all of them, but most of them have their own in-house donor pool. And there are certain advantages in choosing an egg donor that works with a clinic, right? But it's true that we're more limited, I would say, in the variety or the amount of egg donors that we have in our donor pool. So if the intended parents are looking for specific criteria or exotic features in a donor, then they may be better off working with an international or U.S. egg donor agency. There are many, many agencies, fantastic agencies, but again, there are pros and cons when working directly with a clinic and choosing an egg donor from a clinic, or when choosing a donor from an egg donor agency. So it's important to set boundaries at the beginning. What are the maximum, because at the end, it's always going to be financially speaking, more reasonable to select an egg donor from a clinic. But if you don't have that budget issue, then yes, you have a wider pool, I would say, when using an egg donor from an agency.
Okay, so basically when intended parents start their journey, what are the most important questions they should ask when they choose an egg donor?
Well, it really depends on what's important to them. Because if I know that most people, when they look at this process, they do have like a picture in mind, the kind of ideal egg donor that they're looking for. But again, they have to keep in mind that the success of their journey, it's more related to the egg donor they're going to be choosing, that the doctor or the clinic that they're going to be working with, or the agency. At the end, the best doctor in the world cannot do much if you choose the wrong egg donor and you have poor quality eggs and poor quality embryos, or just a few embryos. There's not much they're going to be able to do to help, right? So at the end, physical features are important, of course, but exactly, yeah, in general, health. Most of these donors, especially when you're working with a fertility clinic, they're pre-screened. So there are certain criteria that the minimum basically that we're going to set. So not everyone who wants to be an egg donor and is 25 years old can be an egg donor. Some women will have fantastic fertility when they're 25, and some women will not. So we have to look at a lot of things. And when you're choosing, for example, an egg donor who hasn't donated before, there's more uncertainty, because we're always going to be looking at follicle count and AMH level in order to get an idea of what to expect from an egg donor, even if they haven't been through a cycle before in their life, right? But this is because we're a fertility clinic and we work with local donors that we can call and tell them, just come to the clinic. We're going to run a few tests. We're going to make sure we get an idea and we have an idea of, how good you're going to be as an egg donor before we match you with any of your intended parents, right? But when you're working with out-of-state donors and when you're working with an agency, typically these things are not checked in advance because it involves investment. There are certain tests that you have to pay, and you don't even have a guarantee anyone is going to be picking that egg donor. So regardless of where...
So they have to make sure that the pre-screening process was done properly, or that at least they understand what was screened and what they still need to screen once they found their match.
They have to understand that these two factors, the follicle count and the AMH level, it's very important to get an idea of the kind of donor that you're selecting if they have never donated before. So if the clinic you're working with has this information, they're going to be able to estimate. Of course, until they go through a first cycle, you can never know exactly how those eggs are going to convert into embryos or not, right? But it's at least you're not blind picking an egg donor, because it's the fear factor, right? So if you're picking an egg donor through a clinic, then ask all these questions. If they have this information, it's going to be able to provide a lot more peace of mind when choosing an egg donor. And if you're choosing a donor through an agency, just have an open conversation with them. Just make sure that you are selecting and choosing a flexible provider that is going to be able to help you, because before you end up spending, I don't know, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 in with a fertility clinic to create embryos, make sure you're picking a donor that has the potential to give a good result. So if they have not done these tests, which is normal, most people don't, then ask if it's possible to run these tests before you commit to this egg donor and before she travels to the clinic, so they can give you an idea of the potential that this candidate has. And you'll be better off because you will have more information, less uncertainty, and more peace of mind. So I think this is very important. Besides physical appearance and the criteria that you have in mind when you're going to be looking at a donor pool to select your egg donor, it's really, really important to understand the potential that this person has before you spend all this money in an IVF treatment, right?
Yeah, I know that some intended parents can find their donor really, really fast, but others they can take months until they realize what it is that exactly that they're looking for.
Yeah, for sure. It's sometimes it's 5 minutes. Someone goes into the donor pool, and 5 minutes later, there's like, okay, I got it. I know who my egg donor is going to be. It's like we haven't even given you any information about her, but it's like love first sight kind of thing. Some people are very fast picking an egg donor, and some people really need a lot of time because they're looking for very specific criteria, and those are the tough cases because some of the criteria that people have in mind is rational, and some criteria is very irrational. I don't know. For instance, we do have a lot of intended parents that are looking for a specific eye color in an egg donor. And again, you do have to understand that genetics are funny and you never know for sure what you're gonna get. So
It's not a
we've
guarantee.
discussed this exactly. We've discussed this earlier, right? And you have to look at the whole picture, the whole family picture, to get an idea of the genetic pool that you're getting into. Because you may look at a picture of a beautiful blonde, blue-eyed donor, but everyone else in the family has brown eyes and brunette, and they're short, and she's tall. So most likely she's the unicorn in the family. You're gonna get something else when you get your child. So it's important to look at the whole picture and not choose that specific eye color that this donor has, because I don't know, look at me. I have 3 blue-eyed blonde hair kids, and no one would have picked me if they, if they wanted blue eyes in their children. Probably they would have thought, oh no, she's not an ideal daughter for me. And it turns out that I make blue-eyed kids. So you never know what a donor, what the outcome, and the offspring is going to look like when choosing a donor, because genetics is a huge pool and you don't know what you're going to be getting finally. So it's more about,
I think that the best tip that you're giving us right now is that to take a closer look at the family tree and understand the genetics in the family tree, so you can have a better understanding of the genetic that you're going to bring to your child, and just realize that there are more than one option
yes,
for the upcoming
it's
result.
more of a general vibe what you have to get when you look at a donor, because at the end, we're all different from our brothers and sisters and siblings and parents and grandparents. We look different. Typically, we're different. So you never know what you're going to get. And focusing on a specific physical criteria it's tricky. It's the bottleneck. A lot of people get stuck in there because they don't find the ideal eye color, the ideal height. But then there's never a guarantee that your child is going to be like that. Look at your family pool, look at her family pool, and then get an idea of the different possibilities that that you have around, because at the end you're going to love your child just as much.
That's true. Selma, tell me, what do you think about open donation?
Oh, it's something that is happening. That makes me happy as well, because I believe it's a wonderful experience for everyone, but it's very personal as well. So we do encourage a lot communication with our donors in the future, right? But there are different ways to have contact with donors in the US. If you do want to meet your donor prior to the embryo creation, then you will have to draft a legal contract, and there are more steps, more expenses, and more things that you have to add to your process. But we do use a platform because most of our egg donors are open to having contact, some sort of contact with our intended parents in the future. So it can be just an email exchange, or maybe meeting in person when the child is born, because we've had all sorts of circumstances and scenarios. But at the end, we do have this kind of platform that we use, in which intended parents can register after the embryos have been created, and they can have some sort of contact with their egg donors, because most of them are also registered in that platform. So it's something that most donors, even though people don't know it, would be happy with, it doesn't mean they want to get involved in those children's lives, right? But that they would be open to having some sort of contact with the parents or the kids in the future if they have any questions, if they want to know where they're coming from, or if there's any medical issue in the future, because you never know. So at the end, it's just an open door. It's just having that possibility in case you need or you want to contact that person in the future. And it's something that I would say, 80% or 90% of egg donors in the US are open to having this sort of contact in the future.
Yeah.
That's
That's why
wonderful.
I understood as well. I know that most of the donors, if they'll be suggested with this option, they would completely
Yeah.
agree. It's more on the intended parent side. And I think that people should know that it is a possibility, that there is a very wide range of open donation. You can, as you said, you can meet with her, or you can only know her, genetics, so that you can never know what life will bring you in
Yeah.
the future. So
We've had everything.
sometimes it's better to leave an open door.
We've had people who don't want to have any sort of contact with their donors. They don't want to know anything. And we've had intended parents attend the birth of their children with their egg donor, like together in the delivery room. So it's just, it's a wide spectrum, so whatever works for anyone. But we do feel that at the end, having this possibility, because you know what you want for yourself, but you don't know what your children will want in the future. And it's important to keep in mind that they may be, in a few years, they may be coming to you with certain questions that you can't answer, or they want to know who was that wonderful person who donated eggs and made your family possible. So it's just, I think, a good option to keep in mind.
Okay, so Sayomara, what everybody here wants to know: how much does it cost, and why does it cost so much?
It it can
Is there any way to make it a bit more cost effective?
so it's I mean it can vary a lot, the cost. It really
Yeah.
depends on so many factors that the cost range can go from $20,000 to, I don't know, 60, 70, 80, you name it. Because at the end, it's going to depend, again, on circumstances, criteria, and preferences, right? So why so expensive? I don't know. Life in the US in general, it's more expensive. So we have to keep in mind that it's also, the cost can vary a lot from state to state, because certain states have higher living costs than others. If you go to several states that are more popular, then of course it's also marketing and market. It's demand and offer. So at the end,
Yeah.
you do have to keep all these things in mind when you're going to be doing numbers for your surrogacy or your egg donation process, because at the end, things can change a lot depending on where your egg donor or your surrogate lives, and etc. All egg donors receive a compensation for what they do in the US. And again, egg donors can receive a $4,000 compensation or a $30,000 compensation. It really depends on the egg donor that you're picking and you're choosing. If you're looking for a model, or you're looking for a Ivy League
Ivy League.
student, then of course you're gonna be paying 20, 30, 40,000, $50,000 for your egg donor, because at the end it's a free market and anyone can set the prices, right? So, but typically, it should cost between $35,000 to $50,000 when you're choosing an egg donor and you're making embryos in a clinic, because there are, of course, several and different IVF packages. Some are more inclusive, some are more pay as you go. So there are options for everyone, and at the end, I think that it's also something that people have to invest time in, is just to compare and see what works best for you, just like with your egg donor. At the end, this is a process that is not a process in which people should make rush decisions. I think people have to take the time to discuss and to talk with several providers and compare and see what works best. Because again, you can do a surrogacy process in the US for $120,000, $130,000, or for $200,000. And the service is going to be the same, and the quality and the guarantees are going to be the same, but it would really depend a lot on the decisions that you make and where your service providers and your egg donor and your surrogate live. Because there's a big and significant difference in, between states and states in the US, because the cost of living is just different. So everything goes according to the cost of living of that state, basically. Mm-hmm.
And how many cycles usually does one have to go through in order to have a successful egg donation?
One, if you ask me. That's what we're aiming for, basically. That's why it's so important to choose the right egg donor, because we don't want people to have to do this more than once. We want you to choose well, and we want you to be done after one cycle, to have enough embryos so you have peace of mind and you know that you're going to have enough, to have one or two or even 3 kids with one cycle. We do get involved a lot with our intended parents if they want to. Some people, they know what they want and they go for it and they don't need that much advice because, okay, that's fine. But we encourage intended parents to have open conversations with us before they make a decision on an egg donor or a surrogate. Just talk to us, because at the end, we don't want you to spend more money than what you should, and we want you to be successful on your first cycle and have enough embryos to have as many kids as you want to have. So depending on your end goal and the idea that you have for your process, maybe, you're looking at the egg donor that is not relevant for you or it's not recommended, right? It's not the same someone who wants to have one child and they don't care if it's a boy or a girl than someone who wants to have, 3 or 4 kids. It's the same egg donor is not going to be okay for everyone. Just like the one clinic is not good for everyone or one agency is not good for everyone. That's why you have so many service providers in the US and you have so many egg donors, because it's about choosing the right one for you. And that changes from person to person. So discuss these things before you make a decision. Get your doctors and your coordinators and the people that are helping you involved and listen to them. Because at the end, we don't have any intention or any hidden motives to advise you on something that is not good for you, right? At the end, we
want you to build your family, of course.
We want you to be successful. And if we see that you're focusing on an egg donor that is not good for you, we're going to tell you, we're going to be very transparent, and we're going to say, hey, you want to have 2 or 3 kids, this egg donor may not be enough because she's not a high producer or a high embryo maker, right? So maybe you should be looking at other donors that look similar to this but are going to give you a better result because you want to have a big family, right? And this may not be enough. Now, if you only want to have one child, maybe that's okay. That's why we have so many egg donors, because at the end, not everyone, people have different circumstances.
We spoke a lot about the egg donor and how to choose an egg donor, but I think that we should speak as well about the clinic and how to choose a clinic, because there are so many clinics worldwide and specifically in the US. How do you choose the right one for you?
It's also about connection, because and clinic size and your expectations and your comfort level, because at the end there are clinics that are enormous with 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 doctors and a huge donor pool. But for some people, clinics like that may give you a feeling of factory production kind of thing, like you go into a chain and it's the attention to detail or the patient service that they provide may not be as detailed because they are a high volume clinic. But for some people that works. So it really depends on what you're looking for and the kind of treatment and the kind of service that you want to receive. There are clinics that have only one doctor, but for some people that might feel like it's too small. or too boutique. So for us, we are like a middle-sized clinic. So we do have the good things of the big clinics and the good things of the small clinics. We kind of try to find a balance in between both, because we don't like when people have the feeling of being in a factory chain kind of thing. So we want to personalize, and we want to be able to still pay attention to detail and provide a good patient service. But again, we are big enough, so we have about 100 active donors that we pre-screen, that we know well because they're all domestic and they're all local, and we're able to provide a lot of additional information on them. It's not just what you see on the donor pool. We meet in person with them several times. We do personal interviews. We can tell you if she is funny or serious or outgoing or introverted, because we do like spending time with them to get an idea of who they are as a person as well, which is something that other clinics with a lot of out-of-state donors are not able to do or to provide, because it's just impossible. You can't get to know all your donors. So we try to provide this kind of service that it's not boutique, but it's also but still feels personal, and that we are able to pay attention to detail. And at the end, it's first, and I think most important, about connecting with your intended parents, because you do have to have a good relationship with the people that you're working with and feel a good connection. So I know that we're not for everyone. Some people like us, some people feel more comfortable with other providers, and that's just fine. And I would say that my tip to intended parents would be, spend time, take your time, talk to everyone and see how you feel, because at the end, everyone has their forte. We all are different and special because of something that makes us unique. So you have to find which one of those providers is the good for you.
I wanted to know a bit about ethnicity. I know that there are some ethnicities that are more hard to find, and it might take you a longer time to find a donor from a certain ethnicity. Would you recommend, intended parents to give up on their dream to have a Jewish donor, or I don't know, Indian or whatever, or do you think that it is possible to find even the rare ones?
It's always possible to find, but I don't think it's my place to tell people what they have to give up on. If that's what's important to you, that's what is important to you. But you do have to be aware that it may take a lot longer and it may cost a lot more, because at the end, when you're trying to find a rare donor, then you're gonna end up paying a lot more and taking more time. It's just how it is. But fortunately, in the US, there's so many specialized providers that at the end, anything is possible. If you want to find a Jewish donor, I know it takes time, but there are several agencies that are specialized in that, and they're very good, very professional. They've been doing this for many years, and they may be a great fit for this kind of intended parents. At the end, that's why it's so important to have an open conversation with intended parents before they start this journey. Because for us, as a fertility clinic, we're not committed to anyone. We can work with anyone as long as they are reliable providers. So we're open to putting our intended parents in touch with the right people for them. We listen to what they're hoping for in this process, and then we help them find those providers that are going to complete the journey for them.
Okay, and I'm going back to the cost for 1 second. If someone is having their first journey with you, and then a few years later they want a sibling for their child, would that be less expensive because they're having like two journeys with your clinic?
It is less expensive because typically we don't have to make embryos again. We do have frozen embryos from the first cycle stored at our facility, and we're able to just transfer another embryo into the intended mother or the surrogate. So it's significantly cheaper. At least the IVF part, the medical part, is way less pricey the second time around, because the first time you do have to compensate the donor and you have to create the embryos. Then we just have to we do need to screen the surrogate again, obviously, but then it's just an embryo transfer, frozen embryo transfer, and the cost is way less. Yeah, it's just a fraction.
So basically, once you choose a clinic, you know that it could be a long lasting relationship where you don't only have the first child, you can also build your whole family in the future.
That's basically what we aim for in the first time around. Basically, if we know that this family desires a large family and they want to have several kids, then we're gonna help them find and choose the right egg donor the first time. So we maximize chances, because you can never guarantee 100% right, but we maximize chances of having a healthy number of PGT tested and good tested embryos, so they have enough for their whole family if they want to have one, two, three, or four. That's why it's very important to understand the kind of donor that you pick in the first time. If you don't want to go through this again, if you don't have a budget problem and you have unlimited financial resources, right? Then it's fine. Then you shouldn't be so concerned about the end result, because you can do this several times. It's also not financial, right? Because at the end, mentally having to go through these again, it's emotional, it's a roller coaster. And if we can do this just once and have embryos for as many kids as you want, that would be ideal. And yes, as an answer to your question, yes, we do have very long relationships with our intended parents, because most of our families do want to have more than one kid. So they come back to us for a sibling journey later on, like 2-3 years after the first child is born. They come back and they want to do a new embryo transfer, and typically is with their surrogate from the first time. So it's definitely not as hard the second time around, in general, financially, emotionally, because you've been through this already once. You know your surrogate, you know your doctors, you know your embryos, you know that everything will be fine at the end, and you just go for it the second time. It's a completely different scenario.
Mm-hmm. How many embryos are considered for a good donor?
Oh, that's so hard to answer.
I have hard questions today.
I would say, I think the national average in the US is about 3-4 embryos per cycle. At our clinic, our average is 6-7. But it's just because we do things slightly different. Because we have local donors, we invest a lot of time screening them, and we know them very well, and we know what to expect from them. And also because we get involved in the egg donor selection process. So at the end, if you want to have 2-3 kids, we're going to be helping you to choose correctly. And yeah, it's on average higher than the national average.
Okay, Xiomara, I think that we went through all of the things that I wanted to ask you. Is there anything that you would like to share with our intended parents that are listening right now that we haven't spoken about?
Just that this journey is very emotional. So they do have to be, I think it's always important to do some kind of reflection before you start this process, and approach it with an open mind, and think that you know what you want, but you are gonna have to probably show some flexibility, because at the end, no one is perfect in this world. So probably if you're looking at the small details, and it's going to be hard, it's going to be more difficult, and it's going to be very frustrating. So spend time, be open-minded, compare, do your numbers, make sure all information you're receiving is transparent and it's clear, because it's not so easy to understand things. And don't think that any question is silly, because everything that is important to you is important to this process. So don't hesitate to ask, don't be shy, and just discuss and take the time to speak to everyone and to understand everything properly before you make any decision. And I would say, if you let me, don't ever commit financially to anyone until they can show and they can prove that they're able to provide the service that they're promising, because we're living strange times and sometimes things take longer than what we would like. So it's important to have that freedom to move around. If you like a provider, but they're not able to, provide the service in a timely manner, then maybe you have that flexibility to be able to consider other providers. And just, don't commit in advance, and don't pay in advance, because I think you're gonna feel a lot more relaxed about this process.
Don't commit in advance. I will take that, definitely.
Yeah.
So, Mar, I think that I learned a lot, and we can speak for hours because you're one of, you're so interesting, and every day I learn something new from you. So thank you so much for joining me for this first chapter of our video blog. And we will meet again to discuss the surrogacy journey.
That'd be wonderful.
And other questions that might pop up. I wanted to thank you with all my heart. You're such an amazing person. And honestly, I recommend all the intended parents that are listening to us right now to contact you. If they're stuck, if they're having any difficulties in this journey, I know that you're very, very open to speak with everyone and help them. And you truly are a beautiful human being. So I love you.
Thank you so much, Ronny.
Thank you. And that's, we can wrap it up for our first session. It's been very exciting for me to have this video blog with Xiomara. And I want to thank you all, and I will see you next time on Expecting Answers, our new video blog. Keep on sending us all of your questions about the fertility roller coaster, and we will do our best to answer every single question that you have. I'm Ronny Dgani, and thank you so much. Goodbye.